Today, they spit in your food. Those 4 words, scrawled on a folded napkin, hit billionaire CEO Amelia Devo harder than any stock market crash. For a woman who had built an empire on calculated risks and precise data, this was different. This wasn't business. It was personal, and it was about to expose a dark secret that would rattle an entire industry. Amelia didn't come to the Gilded Cage for dinner. She came undercover, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, to investigate whispers she couldn't ignore. A high-end restaurant she quietly owned in Manhattan had been flagged for discriminatory practices and suspicious kitchen activity in an anonymous letter. She wanted to see for herself, without the usual fanfare of her security detail or entourage. From the moment she walked in, the rumors felt real. She was seated by the kitchen door, ignored by the server for nearly 15 minutes. And now, this. A note from a waiter with a face full of fear and a uniform that looked a size too small. His name was Ben. He didn't ask for a favor. He just told the truth. A truth that was about to blow the lid off a polished, poisonous system. This isn't just a story about food. It's about courage, about what happens when someone risks everything for what's right. It's about the hidden layers of racism that still haunt places of privilege and how one man's bravery forced a reckoning. This is a Black story. And if you've ever wondered how justice really starts, this is it. Before we go any further, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more true stories that matter. Stories that stir the soul and challenge the status quo. Now, breathe deep, because the next 10 minutes will change the way you see power, race, and what happens when a simple napkin turns into a weapon of truth. Amelia Devo was a woman who turned silence into strategy. At 42, she was one of the most respected Black CEOs in America. A self-made mogul who built her billion-dollar empire, Devo Capital Holdings, not through luck, but through precision. She believed in data, discipline, and dignity. But even data couldn't prepare her for the note Ben had left under her water glass. Long before that night, Amelia knew the cost of being underestimated. Raised by her father in a working-class neighborhood in Philadelphia, she'd watched him work 2 jobs so she could afford college textbooks. Her first computer was a refurbished model from a community center, and her first investment was a small business loan she took out at 22 to start her first tech company. Success didn't erase her past. It just buried it deeper. On paper, she now had interests in clean energy, biotech, and luxury hospitality. She drove a silver Porsche Taycan and lived in a penthouse overlooking the Hudson River. But she still remembered the quiet judgment, the way people's eyes would scan her, assessing her worth based on her clothes or her skin. She didn't dress to impress. She dressed to disappear. No flashy jewelry, no designer logos. So, when that anonymous letter landed on her desk 2 weeks earlier, claiming one of her restaurants was mistreating Black customers and employees, she didn't send a lawyer or a PR team. She booked a flight, threw on a hoodie, and walked into the fire herself. No one recognized her when she walked into the Gilded Cage that night, and that was exactly the point. Sometimes to see the truth, you have to disappear inside it. The Gilded Cage was the kind of restaurant that felt more like a fortress, tucked away on a quiet street in Manhattan's Upper East Side. It was all polished mahogany, velvet drapes, and chandeliers that cost more than a year of rent. You didn't just come here to eat, you came to be seen. The walls were adorned with paintings of European nobility and American robber barons, their stern gazes conveniently ignoring the modern-day guests. The name, the Gilded Cage, was a nod to its opulent, almost suffocating exclusivity. But to Amelia, it echoed something else. A place where wealth and privilege were used to trap others. A gilded cage for those who didn't fit. From the moment she entered, the tone was set. The hostess, a young white woman with a practiced, icy smile, scanned Amelia's casual clothes like they were a security risk. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her voice flat. Amelia shook her head. "We're fully booked, but I suppose we can squeeze you in at the bar, or in the back by the service entrance." Amelia nodded. "That's fine." She was led through the grand dining room, past tables filled with white diners in suits and designer dresses. Not a single black face was a customer, only a part of the staff. The walls felt suffocating, and the atmosphere was thick with unspoken rules. The restaurant was operating exactly as it was designed to, a performance of class and exclusion. Ben Reynolds moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet weariness of a person whose dreams had been put on hold. He had once dreamed of becoming a photojournalist to capture the untold stories of the city. He was halfway through his degree at a local university when his father suffered a debilitating stroke. The medical bills piled up, and Ben left school, taking the first decent job he could find to support his family. That job was at the Gilded Cage. The money was good, but the atmosphere was toxic. Ben was one of the few white waiters on staff, and he felt the pressure to perform to a different standard, to be one of them. Management, led by the stern manager, Mr. Thorne, had a clear bias. The black servers were given the least desirable tables, the double shifts, and were often blamed for mistakes. Ben wore a smile like armor, taking orders and swallowing his frustration. But even armor has its breaking point. It was the way Mr. Thorne looked at the black employees, the condescending tones, the quiet jokes in the back office, and the unwritten rule to make certain customers wait. Ben wasn't just a waiter, he was a witness. He saw everything, and tonight felt different. The woman at table 11 didn't fit the usual mold. She was quiet, observant, and oddly calm. When he greeted her, she looked him in the eye, really looked like she saw him, like she noticed his worn-out shoes. That small moment shook something loose inside him. He was done watching. He was going to act, even if it cost him everything. The imperial salmon was not just a dish, it was a spectacle. A whole salmon, flown in from Iceland, baked in a clay shell, and cracked open tableside with a ceremonial hammer. The price tag was over $500. "A dish for show, not soul," Ben muttered under his breath. When Amelia ordered it, Ben blinked. "You'd like the imperial salmon?" he repeated, his voice steady but his heart pounding. She nodded, calm as ever. "And a glass of the 2010 Stag's Leap Chardonnay." Another $150 decision. Ben had taken orders for that dish a dozen times, always from old money, from men who barked orders and women who looked through him, never from someone so quiet and understated, seated at the back table. He felt eyes on him. Across the dining room, Mr. Thorne watched like a hawk. Ben knew what he was thinking. This woman couldn't afford a dish like this. If it went unpaid, the blame would fall on him. Amelia asked, a sharpness beneath her calm. "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "Coming right up." He turned and headed for the POS terminal. The rules were clear. If a customer looked questionable and ordered an expensive meal, management expected a credit card before the kitchen fired it. No exceptions. Ben didn't do that. He keyed in the order like it was any other. The screen flashed red, requiring manager approval. But Ben hit override and swiped his own ID. He'd just taken personal responsibility for a $650 order on a gut instinct. Behind him, Mr. Thorne's voice boomed. "Did she pay up front?" Ben replied without turning around. "No, sir." "Then you better pray she does," Thorne growled. Ben wasn't praying. He was planning. Because maybe, just maybe, this woman wasn't here to be served. Maybe she was here to see. And if she was about to see everything. Ben had watched many things happen in that kitchen, But what he saw tonight shattered the last sliver of silence he had been holding on to. As the imperial salmon was prepped, he noticed Chef Julian, a man known for his temper, lean over the steaming fish with a twisted grin. Then came the act, subtle and quick, but unmistakable. He spat right onto the fish, turned it over, and acted as if nothing had happened. The sous chef laughed. Ben froze. His first instinct was denial. But the laughter told the truth. This wasn't new. It was a sick ritual. The rage bubbled under his skin, hot and sharp, but he couldn't scream. He looked toward the dining room and saw Amelia, still calm, still watching. He had seconds to decide. Serve a contaminated meal to a woman who might hold the keys to this place's future, or take a risk that could end his career on the spot. He reached into his apron pocket and pulled out a service pen and a fresh linen napkin. His hands trembled as he wrote, the ink skipping across the fine thread. They spit in your food. This place is not safe. Ask to see the kitchen cameras. No name, no signature, just the truth. He folded it tight and slipped it into his pocket as the plate was handed to him under a silver dome. As he walked the plate to her table, his heart hammered in his chest. With practiced grace, he placed the plate before her and, as she reached for her water, he subtly slid the napkin under the corner of her plate. A second later, he was gone. Amelia sat still, staring at the folded napkin. She hadn't touched the fish. Something in Ben's eyes had told her to wait. She reached forward and slid the napkin into her palm. Unfolding it, the words stared back at her. They spit in your food. This place is not safe. Ask to see the kitchen cameras. Her jaw locked. It wasn't the spit that got to her. It was the phrase, "This place is not safe." That was systemic rot. Ben wasn't just protecting her. He was sounding an alarm for an entire culture of cruelty. Amelia folded the napkin, slipped it into her pocket, and pushed the plate away. She didn't make a scene. She pulled out her phone and sent a secure message to her chief of security. Red flag at the Gilded Cage. Pull all kitchen camera backups for tonight. Quiet, fast, full report. Then she stood and approached Mr. Thorne. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his smile not reaching his eyes. "I'd like to speak to you privately," she said, her voice calm and cold. Inside his office, Thorne launched into a polished speech about guest satisfaction. Amelia cut him off. "I'd like to see your kitchen cameras right now." Thorne's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." In that moment, the CEO had arrived. Thorne hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "The kitchen cameras are for inventory," he stammered. "Fine. Let's start with tonight's footage, specifically when my fish was prepared." Thorne's face paled. He tried to deflect. "Our system only archives in 30-minute blocks." Amelia didn't blink. "I'm giving you one chance. Are you the man who helps me fix a problem, or are you the man who tried to bury it?" Still, Thorne tried one last deflection. "Ma'am, who exactly are you?" Amelia leaned in. "I'm the woman who owns this building. And if I see one more lie fall out of your mouth, you won't have another one to cash." Thorne's face went white as a sheet. He fumbled with a key, pulled out a dusty drive, and began scrolling through fragmented footage. Then, abruptly, a jump, a clean cut. Footage skipped exactly 2 minutes and 12 seconds, the moment the fish was plated. The biggest twist of all was that Mr. Thorne had tampered with the footage. Amelia pulled out her phone, fired off a second message. "Partial footage. Tampering. Flag Mr. Thorne. Interview staff. Preserve all files." She looked at Thorne, who was now sweating profusely. "You're done for tonight," she said. "Walk me out. Then go home. And I strongly suggest you call a lawyer." The door was no longer shut. The drive back to her hotel felt longer than it was. Amelia didn't turn on the radio. By the time she reached her suite, her security team had already responded, pulling raw, uncut backups from the cloud servers. The footage was time-stamped and crystal clear. Chef Julian spat on the fish with a twisted smile, the audio catching his words. "That's what you get for acting like you belong here." He turned to the sous chef, who laughed and nodded. This wasn't a mistake. It was a culture. The log showed this wasn't the first time. Earlier footage revealed another incident. A black family was made to wait for their plate for nearly 40 minutes. Behind the scenes, the kitchen laughed. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was policy in disguise. Amelia encrypted the files and sent them to her legal team and PR head. Full internal review, staff interviews, emergency compliance training. Do not breathe a word until I say go. They had tried to humiliate her, and they had failed. They had instead exposed a sickness that had gone unchecked for too long. The next morning, Ben showed up to work, exhausted and terrified. He hadn't slept, waiting for the call, the confrontation. But when he walked in, no one said a word. "Mr. Thorne's office," the hostess whispered. Ben's heart sank. He walked down the long hallway, expecting to be fired. What he didn't expect was her. Amelia stood there, still in that same hoodie, but this time she was in command. "Ben Reynolds," she said, motioning for him to sit. He didn't. "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." She held up a hand. "You should have," she said. "And you did. I own this place. The building, the brand, the people who run it. They answer to me. I've seen what happened in that kitchen." Ben looked down. "I didn't know who else to tell." "You didn't have to," Amelia replied. "You did more than most people ever would. I can have this place shut down today. But before I do that, I need one thing from you." Ben looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "What?" "You can walk away quietly. I'll make sure you're taken care of. A scholarship, a new job. Or," she continued, "you can stay. Help me rebuild this place from the inside as the new director of ethics and culture." Ben stared at her, his voice shaking. "You really trust me with that?" Amelia nodded. "I already did. You just didn't know it yet." And in that moment, Ben breathed without fear for the first time in a long time. The next 24 hours moved fast. By noon, the Gilded Cage was a crime scene in a tuxedo. Amelia moved with precision. Her legal team flew in from Silicon Valley. Her PR team was already drafting the statement. At 12:30 p.m., 2 unmarked SUVs pulled up outside. The lunch crowd was just trickling in when 2 federal agents stepped inside. Chef Julian didn't even make it to the back exit. He was escorted out the front door, still wearing his apron. The sous chef followed. Then, Mr. Thorne. 3 arrests. 1 day. No negotiations. The staff was stunned, some frozen, some quietly clapping. A few just watched, mouths open. Outside, Amelia stepped up to a podium. Reporters gathered. "Yesterday, I entered this building as a customer. Today, I stand here as its owner," she began, her voice steady. "What I saw inside this restaurant does not reflect the values of Devo Capital Holdings. This was not a bad apple. It was a broken tree, and we are cutting it down." She gestured toward Ben, who stood quietly to her right. This man showed more integrity in one night than most executives do in a career. He is the reason this truth came to light, and he is the reason this place has a future. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was real. Amelia finished with one final statement. "We're not canceling the Gilded Cage. We're rebuilding it from the inside. And this time, it's going to serve more than just food. It's going to serve justice." Ben had never worn a suit jacket that cost more than his rent. Until now. 2 weeks after the arrests, the Gilded Cage remained closed. The kitchen was gutted, the walls repainted, and the uniforms redesigned. The portraits of robber barons were gone, replaced with framed images of local heroes, community leaders, and artists. At the center of it all, Ben sat at his new desk. He still wasn't used to the title Director of Ethics and Culture, but Amelia had insisted it was more than a title. It was a commitment. His first act was a staff-wide meeting. No suits, no scripts, just a circle of chairs in the dining room. He told them what happened, not with shame, but with strength. He explained why the culture failed, why silence is never neutral, and how they were all going to do better together. He also went back to school. Amelia had offered to cover his tuition if he ever wanted to finish his degree, and he said yes, part-time, because justice didn't stop at one restaurant. Ben no longer walked like an invisible waiter. He walked like a man who had been through the fire and came out clear. People started to ask him questions, real ones, about belonging, about dignity, about how to speak up when it's scary. And every time someone asked, he told the same story about a folded napkin, a risk, a woman who listened, and a job that was never just about tips. It was about truth. Ben Reynolds was no longer a server. He was serving something far more important now. It wasn't a press conference that changed the Gilded Cage. It wasn't the lawsuits or the headlines. It was a napkin, folded in half, written in haste, delivered in silence. That's all it took to expose a system of quiet cruelty. One simple act of courage lit a match in a room soaked in gasoline. The fire didn't destroy everything. It revealed what was already rotting. The lesson here isn't just about restaurants or management. It's about everyday people in quiet jobs doing extraordinary things. Ben didn't have power. He didn't have a title, but he had clarity. He saw something wrong, and instead of looking away, he acted. He wrote the truth and passed it to someone who would listen. And that's the heart of this black story. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't grand or loud. It's the decision to risk your safety, your paycheck, your future, to protect something bigger than yourself. So here's the question for you. What injustice have you seen and stayed quiet about? And more importantly, what might change if you spoke up? If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that integrity still matters, that courage is contagious. And if you want more stories like this, the kind they don't put in textbooks, subscribe. Because sometimes it's not the big speeches or the bold protests that shift the world. Sometimes it's just a napkin and someone brave enough to write the truth on it.